Hey, thanks for joining and watching this video on how to buy your new Liveaboard boat. We had been planning on retiring and cruising for the better part of a decade, and it was right around COVID when we decided to take the leap. Those nagging existential questions about whether or not we are making the most out of life and what life is really all about and what we want and need to be happy were finally too much to ignore, so we finally took the leap. In this video, we'll give you 10 tips which will hopefully avoid costly mistakes, unnecessary frustrations, and enhance your boat buying experience. The tips in this video are sequentially laid out, starting at the beginning of the boat buying process and largely ending at the end. You're going to want to stick around for the middle because that's where we made most of our mistakes, and we hope you can avoid those same mistakes. Although this video is mostly about our experience buying a new boat, many of the tips that we've articulated in here can be applied to buying a used boat as well. As many of you know, we purchased Wild One new. We didn't originally set out to buy a new boat, and so we were relatively inexperienced in that entire process. We made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we learned a few things. And in this video, we're going to share them with you so that hopefully, if you're ever in this position, you can avoid the same mistakes. Before we get into all of this, I want to send out a great thanks to all of our existing subscribers that have hung with us. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. And if you happen to like this video by the time you get to the end of it and you want to support this channel, please hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. We'd really appreciate it, and it means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Tip number 1, be realistic about your needs. Prior to Wild One, we owned a 1992 Catalina 42, and I readily subscribed to the idea that the best boat to cruise on is the boat that you already own. And so I started an extensive refit. This refit, although it was a labor of love, lasted several months and cost over $30,000. However, after costly weekends and days and nights up at the boat, I finally came to the conclusion that Farage just was not going to be the boat for us. And so I put Farage on the market and took a $30,000 loss selling her. There were many things about Farage that we considered inadequate. The living space was too small for our needs. There was inadequate tankage. There was inadequate storage. We had a fin keel with a 7-foot 8-inch draft. And although I was slightly concerned about the draft of Farage at the time, I know now it would have been a much more significant challenge.
Shereen, this Hilux 49 is perfect for us. It's so well built.
I agree. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the inside woodwork, the beautiful estate room. But Mike, what's the difference between that and the Catalina 42? It's almost identical besides a few feet bigger.
What's the difference? It's a lot bigger. The beam is a lot bigger. It's much more luxurious. The center cockpit is going to be super safe.
I know. These are all valid points, but let's be honest. I get seasick. And so when we're on long passages, I'm in that center cockpit the whole time. Whether it's bad weather, good weather, whatever's going on, I'm in the center cockpit. I am not down below. I am not making meals. I am not sleeping soundly. It's going to be a disaster during passage.
Dude, I really think you're underselling the Hilux, man. It is such a well-known boat. It's so well-known. And we know the owner of this boat. It's one of our it's one of our best friend's father's boat. It was so lightly used. It's only a couple years old. It's been sitting on the hard for most of its life. Dude, I think it'd be stupid to let this boat go.
Call me stupid.
Dude, I do not think you're getting it. You are way overplaying the livability aspect of this boat.
You and I have done a lot of research, and we both know that you're on the hook 90% of the time. You're on the hook 90% of the time. And that 10% of traveling, A, has to be safe. You're right, the Hilux is safer than most catamarans. But that 10%, we both have to be on full time, because we're going to be alone sailing most of the time. And you're not going to have an equal partner, because I'm going to be seasick most of the time and not sleeping well.
God, I'm so bummed out. All right, we'll withdraw our offer.
Tip number 2, identify the right type of boat. Now, I know we spent $30,000 and some would consider this a failure, but at the end of the day, I think we did a pretty good job at this. I proceeded to put together a fairly extensive spreadsheet listing all types of boats. I did a significant amount of research on the build quality of the boat. I did a significant amount of research on their performance and their drafts and their price ranges and all sorts of things. Initially, we didn't know if we wanted to buy a sloop or catamaran, and in fact, we placed a bid on a Hylas 49. It wasn't until after our visit to Fort Lauderdale to see a Hylas 48 that Shireen finally said, I just don't see how this boat is any different than our Catalina 42. And so, at the end of the day, we backed out of that deal and we decided to focus solely on catamaran. Shireen was right ultimately, and the reality is we would have had to buy a much larger boat in order to satisfy our goals. For example, we looked briefly at the Hylas 57, even though it was significantly out of our price range, and it was an absolute beautiful boat. However, it was way outside our price range. Tip number 3 is be realistic about your budget. Our initial budget was $400,000, and it didn't take long before realizing that something had to change. Either our budget had to go up, or we had to reevaluate what was important for us. Make sure you have alignment between what's important to you and what's important with your significant other. This is a very frustrating, humbling, and time-consuming process, and involves a lot of discussions and a lot of debates and a lot of research to finally hone in to exactly what boat you want to get and what you're willing to pay for it. There was one thing that was absolutely a deal killer for us, and that was we did not want a project boat. I had already spent a significant amount of time on Farage, and I just didn't want to do that again. Tip number 4, have a plan and be realistic about where you want to take delivery of that boat. We were living in California when we ordered Wild One. It just didn't seem feasible, for example, to take delivery in Delaware simply to save on state sales tax. Furthermore, taking delivery offshore to save on United States duty just didn't make sense either. At the end of the day, we decided on taking delivery in Florida. And although sales tax on a boat were 6%, they have an $18,000 cap. So, no matter what, compared to California, it was a big win. Tip number 5, you've got to find the right broker. I cannot stress this enough. This is an area that I didn't do enough research. I'm not going to name the specific broker we use, nor I'm going to name any specific names. However, suffice it to say, we've come across a number of people that have had dealings with this dealer that have had similar experiences. All in all, it was not a super great buying experience, and I wish we had done it differently. These are some of the things we've learned. Even though we lived in California and we knew we weren't going to bring the boat to California, we didn't really care where on the East Coast we wanted to take delivery for the most part. We were told by the dealer that I had reached out to when I was initially looking at Nautatex that I needed to buy from him. At the end of the day, I didn't. I could have bought from another dealer on the East Coast, and as a matter of fact, I'm quite sure I probably could have bought from anybody else. The fact is, I would choose the broker first and let that influence where you take delivery more than anything else. Anybody who's bought a boat knows boat buying is a very emotional experience. If at any time prior to signing a contract you think there's something off with the broker, you need to walk away. This relationship is long-term. In our experience, it only gets worse once you sign that contract. Your broker may pick you up in a luxurious black SUV at the airport and whisk you off to see this brand new boat. Don't be blindsided by this. If there is anything off, if you hear any sort of bad reviews about this broker, walk away. My understanding is that boats that are delivered on ships have some amount of commissioning that needs to be done by the brokerage. Before you sign that contract, understand from the broker what exactly they are going to be doing to commission that boat. If the brokerage doesn't already have a list of things that they do for commissioning a boat, you should wonder why. If they do have one, get that list. Have them write it down if you are fully committed to that brokerage. I've purchased $20,000 cars in my life and have gotten better customer service in the purchase of that vehicle than I've gotten on my much more expensive Nautatex 46. If you're buying a boat that's coming in from overseas, like for example Europe, ask what sorts of things you are going to need for the boat to make it weekend ready. I'm not talking about the list of things that you're going to want before you go setting off across oceans or living on her extensively in the Bahamas. I'm just talking bare necessities like adapters for shore power, cables, or adapters for propane tanks, or even the propane tank itself. Get a list. If the brokerage doesn't have a list, I would ask yourself why. Ask about how warranty work is to be done. Ask about where warranty work is to be done. Ask about the duration of warranties. Ask about the types of warranty work. Ask for a written policy on the warranty. Most importantly, ask where warranty work is to be done. Like I mentioned to you, we took delivery of Wild One in Florida, and we store Wild One in Virginia when we're not using her and during a hurricane season. However, when we're on Wild One, we're largely in the Bahamas. If we have a warranty claim, we need to go back to Miami, and it is hugely inconvenient. This is yet another reason why you should think carefully about what your brokerage is and where you intend to keep the boat. The dealer talked us into buying our boat much earlier than we really wanted to. We were living in California at the time. We really had no way to take care of a boat living on the West Coast with the boat being delivered to Fort Lauderdale. So we worked out a deal with the dealer. The dealer would take the boat to the Miami Boat Show, and the time between when the boat would get delivered and when we would actually take it off his hands, that dealer would be responsible for taking care of the boat. We got a little bit of extra cash back, but in my humble opinion, it wasn't worth it. Now, we didn't do a very good job at all in getting in writing from the dealer on what exactly he was and was not going to do to take care of that boat. So regardless of what your situation is, regardless of any specific or special circumstances, make sure you get in writing from the dealer exactly what they are and what they are not going to do, and be very verbose and very explicit. Our dealer had the propensity of being very succinct. Now, I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but at the time, in the back of my mind, as an engineer, I thought that things were woefully and inadequately spelled out for us. That should have raised a red flag in my mind. I should have insisted on more details written down into the contract, but I didn't. Start looking for insurance early. Insurance is a pain in the butt for any boater, let alone a boater with limited boating experience or a boater that is purchasing a boat that is much larger than something they're accustomed to. You're going to need a sailing resume, so you might as well start writing one down now. It takes time, and keep it updated. You're going to need it throughout the ownership of your boat. In addition, if you plan to use or keep the boat somewhere where there's hurricanes, you're going to need a hurricane preparedness plan, so you might as well start writing one down now. Tip number 7, start looking for marinas and boat yards now. If you're buying a catamaran that has a fairly large beam, the availability of marinas that can accommodate you are far less than its typical sloop. Furthermore, if you're buying a boat that has an air draft greater than 63 feet, this too is also going to limit the marinas and boat yards that you can go to more than likely. You need to start looking at this now. Many boat buyers have a perspective that you can add aftermarket equipment at a much less price than what you would get from the boat builder. And while this is true in a lot of cases, I don't think necessarily it is true in all cases. In addition to that, installing HVAC, for example, aftermarket is much more invasive and much more difficult to do than if it were to be done by the builder. It won't be as tidy. It won't be as clean of an installation. It's going to be a significant rework. Some options, like interior blinds, for example, are much more difficult to get and install, and much more costlier to install aftermarket than they are if the builder would just do it. This is one thing I wish we would have had installed that we didn't. Tip number 9, ask if there's an opportunity to modify your vessel beyond what the builder is willing to do. For example, can you bring in outside firms to install solar that's slightly different than what the builder would provide? Many builders will not, some will. Just need to ask. And my last and final tip, number 10, have a lot of fun doing this. You are exceedingly lucky to be able to buy a new boat. Buying a new boat is very exciting. It can be frustrating at times. Don't get bogged down by that. It is a very fun experience. Have a lot of fun doing it. I want to thank you for the privilege of your time in watching this video. If you're a subscriber, I want to thank you so much for supporting us. We really, really appreciate it. If you happen to like this video and you want to support this channel, please hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go, and we would really appreciate it. It means so much to us. Thanks a lot, and we hope to see you out on the water. In fact, we would have had in fact, the nagging existential questions of what the meaning of life was, the nagging existential questions of the nagging existential questions about tip number 9. Tip number 9. All right, to support our electronic needs. Who are you waving to?
Why?
Oh. This is something, and whether or not your needs between you and your partner are comparable. No, not comparable. Tip number 3, that your needs are compatible with your, compatible? I'm not going to name specific, I'm not going to name a specific broker or names or the individual I'm not going to name. Tip number 6, start looking for insurance only. We had been planning on retiring for better than a, for it. I don't know why I always have to go off script. Right? It's crazy. It's written right there, but I can't say the same thing ever, anyway. Like,
That doesn't matter. Just the gist.
no, I know, but like, all right. Tip number 2,